The day that Aubergine started was the same day of Elcio Zanatta's birthday. He's the CEO of the company. We're going to bring him up here in just a second. It was his birthday. He's shaking his head back there at me. I want everybody in this room to join me in singing Happy Birthday to Elcio Zanatta. Are we ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Elcio and Aubergine. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, this was not in the script, I promise you. Okay, it's a great pleasure to be tonight with you here. I feel so good to have this special moment with you. Last Monday, 3 days ago or 4 days ago, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of Aubergine. Yeah. And I remember that since the very beginning, we had a purpose in our mind and heart. My family, who is here, my beautiful wife, Miriam, Eduardo, and Julia. And we said we want to help people change their lives with real food. And this has driven us. And then some nights before we opened the first Aubergine in Orem, we were talking to friends in a dinner, and he told me, are you going to sell soda? I said, no, we won't sell soda there. We are going to do something different. And he said, no restaurants ever survived in Utah County without soda. That was a long night for me. I couldn't sleep. But we stick to our principles we chose to live by. We have seven principles, and I do believe when we stick to principles, to values you believe, things work out. And since the very beginning, without any marketing, people start coming, supporting us, embracing us. You embraced us. And my family is forever grateful for your support, your help, your trust. I remember some customer would come to us and say, please don't close, don't close, don't close. We didn't understand. It's because it's a hard business, you know. Most restaurants close in the first year. And they were so willing to help, coming many times to support us. And this was the reason of our success, your support. And Aubergine is not just a restaurant. Aubergine is a movement from food that harms to food that heals. It's a movement from food that harms to food that heals. That's what we are about. We live one of our values is continuous improvement. And we are always trying to improve for you. We work diligently, persistently, every day, with passion for what we are doing, helping people change their lives. When new knowledge comes, we raise a new bar, we rise to it. If new knowledge comes and raise the bar, we will try to be there. We work diligently. I have a wonderful team of collaborators who help us to do that with passion, because they do believe that on our purpose. And that's what integrity means for myself and for my family. To live by our values and our principles, and we never compromise. My wife and I always tell our precious things in life are our grandchildren. We love them. And then everything we do and we are going to put in the restaurant, we ask the question, can our grandchildren eat this food? If it passes this test, we launch at Aubergine. And we are always keep learning. We want to learn more for us to improve our recipes and then make you happier. And in search for truths, in pursuit of truths, we are bringing today Dr. Fuhrman. Huh? I remember once I read one of his books, and I was trying to adjust some blood draw from myself, and doctors say, no, this is genetic, this is age, even though I am very young, 35. And then I read his book, I made some adjustments, and I improved, applied this to Aubergine too, and everything changed. And then I said, oh, I would love to have a consultation with him. And he was not doing this anymore because Dr. Fuhrman has a mission to change America for the better. And he's writing books, giving speeches like this. He has two wellness centers, and one in San Diego is very beautiful and helping people. And it was a dream. But then we decided, okay, let's call him because we would like to learn more from him and to help the community, to give back to the community which has given us so much. And he promptly said, yes, I can come. And Dr. Fuhrman is here to teach us today. And if you feel overwhelmed by the lifestyle he proposes, don't feel like that. Don't feel overwhelmed. Just try to learn the principles he's teaching and apply in your life the way you can, the way you are ready to do. The important thing is improve every day, continuous improvement. And now I would like to invite Dr. Fuhrman, a man who I admire, became a friend, and respect so much.
Well, how exciting is this? Can you imagine that? Thank you. Wow. Well, I'm overwhelmed. I'm so grateful that all you came out here tonight to listen to me speak. Wow, what an honor. I'm so happy that you're here. Wow, I'm thrilled about this. Wow. And you know what I'm thinking? Why can't this be, with all these people interested in being in great health, why can't this be one of the excellent blue zones of the world where people live longer than any other part of the world, right here in Utah? It should be, right? Because I travel around the world and I speak to usually medical audiences. And you know what I ask them at the beginning when I'm speaking to them? I say, raise your hand if you or your loved ones, somebody you're close to, has been shot by a bullet or stabbed by a knife. And like 2 people raise their hand. How about you guys? Have been shot by a bullet? Well, I don't know. Nobody? Well, then I say, well, how about close to you, a family or something, have a heart attack or a stroke or a cancer diagnosis? Now raise your hand. And as the audience of physicians, everybody's hand goes up. And I say to them, do you want to stay living in that dangerous neighborhood where your life is at risk when nutritional science has made such advances that you don't have to have a heart attack or a stroke? And we can win the war on cancer right now with what we have available to us, with these modern advances in nutritional science. We can take control of our health destiny and not have happen to you what happens to your people you care about, your neighbors, your friends, your family. Why sacrifice 20 years of your life due to your addiction and learned preference for self-destructive foods, which the American diet is? When I put the American diet on the board on my PBS television show, I explained how all those features of the diet are exactly what the scientific literature is showing creates an epidemic of cancer. And I said, that diet's been designed by Al Qaeda. And they cut it out. They dubbed it out. So if you look at my old show, it'll say, that diet's been designed by, and then they have a different voice, not my voice, saying, Darth Vader. Darth Vader. Wasn't that funny? But I'm embarrassed about the bad joke now. But it's not my joke. All right, let's get started here, because what I'm saying here is we do have this unprecedented opportunity in human history with the corroborative evidence from thousands of scientific studies. And in my most recent book, Eat for Life, I have more than 2,000 scientific references, not 30 or 40 or 100, but 2,000, representing my review of more than 30,000 scientific references, picking out the best 2,000, to show people that we're not basing these recommendations on a few studies. We're basing on an overwhelming amount of evidence that's at this point in human history is irrefutable. And that evidence is leading to the conclusion that you can make choices in your life to not have a heart attack, not have a stroke, not get breast cancer, not get prostate cancer, and push the envelope of healthy life expectancy 20 years longer, where the average lifespan of humans should be between 95 and 105 years old, not the 75 to 80 that's in America today. So I'm hoping you guys can take advantage of this information and use this as a starting point to move forward in a better direction. Unless you're there already, then I'm still happy you're here too. Wherever you're starting from, this is information that people need to have. So let's get started. You ready to get going? Yes. Okay. Okay, we're getting started with the basics here. We're going through the beginning and going through some basic information I want you to have. And the first thing is that food gives us nutrients. And it gives us two types of nutrients, both macronutrients, which are the sources of calories, right? Macro means large, and we need to consume some fat, some carbohydrate, and some protein. But here's what you're learning tonight. You're learning that the more calories you consume in life, the shorter your lifespan. So I can say pretty definitively that Americans eat too much fat, too much carbohydrate, and too much protein. Way too much. Because if we look at primitive societies, or even rural societies like rural China or primitive tribes in the Amazon, we look at what humans ate for generations, we found they generally consumed about 1,400 to 1,600 calories a day. Thank you for raising the mic. Terrific. So I say, we live on half of what we eat. Half of what we eat meets our needs, and the other half meets the needs of our doctors. You follow that? It sounds like a joke, but it's kind of accurate. It's accurate when we consider that Americans are eating about double the calories people require. They're eating on the average about 3,300 calories a day when people need about 1,600 to 1,800. You following that? Now, of course, there's a wide variety of what people need based on individual size and differences in activity, maybe between 1,200 and 2,000, or maybe some athletes need more. But overall, Americans consume about double the calories. So we know that when you consume extra calories, it raises your metabolism, and your metabolism is tied to the speed of your aging process. That if we raise your body temperature and we raise the speed of your respiratory quotient, the amount of calories burned through breathing, and we bring up your thyroid to burn more calories, then you're going to age faster, and your telomeres are going to shorten, and your stem cells are going to be destroyed when you're younger, and you're going to leave yourself susceptible to an earlier death. Let me say that one more time. I'm saying I can control my metabolism, and I can control the rate at which I'm aging by just putting the dial down or putting the dial up. We're going to go into this, that as we increase calories, we speed up the rate we're aging and we shorten lifespan. So Americans are on you could say, they're on a mission to commit suicide with food, to eat empty calories, calories that don't have nutrients in them. Because when you eat calories that are nutrient void, it increases your desire to eat more calories. You're not satisfied with the right amount of calories. And you become a calorie-consuming monster when you're not having a diet that supplies you with nutritional adequacy. So the first principle of a nutritarian diet has to do with macronutrients and micronutrients, because micronutrients are the part of food that do not contain calories. They're vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, and antioxidants that are necessary to prolong lifespan and prevent cancer and prevent infection like pneumonia, and to prevent heart disease. That the body lowers inflammation and improves immune function when we have a higher micronutrient density in our cells. That's what we're trying to achieve, a high level of micronutrient density in our cells without consuming excess calories. That's the basic principle you're learning here. So what I'm saying right now is that the foundational principle of a nutritarian diet, the most proven methodology to slow aging, has to do with these 5 words I want you to memorize. These 5 words are moderate caloric restriction, those are 3 of the words, moderate caloric restriction with micronutrient excellence. You can memorize that, right? Moderate caloric restriction in the context of micronutrient excellence. So it's represented by this equation, H equals N over C, which means your healthy life expectancy, how healthy you're going to be in your later years, extend your play span, your health span, and your lifespan, is proportional to the micronutrient bang per caloric buck that you consume your whole life. You consume more foods with micronutrient richness, you live longer, and you consume foods that are micronutrient deficient, you live shorter. Did you follow that? And I talk about that, we're going to talk about this idea of moderate caloric intake, about this, why people overeat, about this concept of caloric rush. The caloric rush, it means that certain foods, when you eat them, it puts a huge amount of calories in the bloodstream all at once, within minutes. Like when you pour oil on your food, like canola oil, safflower oil, even olive oil, because oil is stripped of its fiber, it's taken out of a food that had the fat wrapped with fiber. When you isolate the oil, it's absorbed very rapidly. And when these foods are absorbed rapidly, a lot of calories can enter the bloodstream all at once. So when you're having oil, it might enter the bloodstream at about 60 calories a minute. So they say from the lips to the hips in 5 minutes flat. Goes right into the body, stored as fat. Because you can't burn 60 calories a minute when you're sitting there at rest or even when you're exercising. You burn about 1 or 2 calories a minute. Whereas if you had, instead of having the fat from the oil, or the animal fat for that matter, which is absorbed very rapidly, if you had the fat from a nut or a seed, like a walnut or an almond, it would be absorbed 50 times slower, 1/50th the rate, at about 1 calorie a minute, not 50 calories a minute or 60 calories a minute. And at that rate, as your body's slowly absorbing those fats, it can preferentially burn it for energy and not turn on fat storage mechanisms. So it's a very different concept. But when I'm bringing this up is it's not just oil, it's also sugar and white flour. And I want you to understand that white flour is a sugar equivalent. There's no biological difference between eating a bagel, a pizza, a burger, or a cookie, and eating candy, or just having a bowl of sugar, just eating it right from the bowl of sugar in your mouth. Because the overall biological effect's the same. It puts a big load of glucose into your bloodstream all at once. Calories in the bloodstream that humans could never have achieved in primitive times. Only today could we put 300, 400 calories into the bloodstream. But what happens when you put all those calories in the bloodstream? Well, when you put so many calories in the bloodstream, it affects your brain, not just your body. It stimulates the opiate centers of the brain, the same areas that are stimulated by narcotics and cocaine, and it makes you desire more of that stimulation from the caloric rush. And it makes you become dopamine insensitive over time. So just like you can build up tolerance to heroin where you need a bigger dose, as you're used to this heavy caloric load that rushes into the bloodstream, you now have a desire for more of a caloric rush and more foods that are going to push all that calories into the bloodstream. And you're not satisfied with a simple meal. Having some string beans and broccoli and sweet potato and pistachio nuts, it wouldn't even apple for dessert, wouldn't satisfy you. You need something more calorically kind of sucked into the blood really fast. You got to have like a piece of cheesecake or a little ice cream or some soda or some French fries or at least some white bread with butter on it. You got to have something that's going to push more calories in the blood or you feel empty. Almost all Americans have some degree of addiction to foods that are self-destructive to their own survival. And why? Why would you eat a food that's destructive to your own mental well-being or your survival? And the reason is because those foods are biologically not designed for the human species. They're foods that have been made by scientists and food technologists to get you hooked and to make you want to eat them and to want to eat more of them. That's what the food industry does, and the fast food industry, and the processed food industry. It gets people wanting to eat more of the foods they're making, and they're designed by food scientists to make people want to eat more of them. And the overall effect is a nation that's riddled with heart disease, strokes, and cancers. Don't forget, heart disease is still the #1 cause of death in America. How many people die of heart attacks and strokes in this country now? About 40%. And how many people you think died of heart attacks and strokes 100 years ago? 4%. Look back, what about if we went back to the 15th century? How many people died of cancer back then? Nobody. Cancers first occurred in medical history in the 15th century. They started finding scrotal cancers and testicular cancers in males who worked as chimney sweeps from breathing in smoke. But nobody could eat enough calories, enough junk food. They didn't make junk food then to be able to get cancer and to be able to get overweight, to drive cancer replication. So here's what I'm saying here. I'm saying that if we go back to the natural, not the oil, but the nuts that supply the fat, then it puts less slow calories in the blood. Those are slow food. So fast food is not just food you eat at a fast food restaurant. And that since you know that sugar and white flour are the same thing, is that, we're going to talk about these, that they're not foods. Sugar and flour are not foods. So when you eat the white bread or the bagel or the pizza, you're not eating a food, you're eating a drug. It's effective because food gives you nutrients to sustain life. And white flour products take nutrients away from the body to cause death. They're not nutritive, they're stripping nutrients out of the body because to convert glucose into energy, your body has to use cofactors called vitamins in the mitochondria, and it produces reactive oxygen species, a type of free radical that has to be diffused with antioxidants to not damage cell tissue, not to damage the cell. So you're causing damage and causing nutritional deficiencies as you bite and eat those drug-like foods. They're not really foods. I mean, how do you spell food backwards? How do you pronounce the word if you spelled food backwards? Doof. It's doof you're eating, but you're a doof if you're eating that stuff. You've been doofed. And the food addict goes to the airport and they subconsciously don't realize it. They didn't really think about it, but they didn't bring any food with them in their bag. So they look around, they rationalize themselves. There's nothing to eat, they got to eat something. The only thing they have is bagels and pizza, and I'd have something that's, and what do they serve on the plane? All junk food, so I just have to eat junk food. I'll just eat a little bit of it. In other words, the addictive personality, these foods take over the brain on such a primitive level, ingrained in your primitive brain, that you're even tricking yourself with excuses and reasons why and setting yourself up. So you're left with no option to eat those foods. Oh, it's all that's around. How can I can't get anything healthy. Let me just eat whatever I can get mine. Right? It's like, that's how the addictive mind works. The addictive mind always comes up with some excuse. I mean, as you're sitting here listening to me talk, I know what's going into your head right now. You're saying, this sounds really good. It's going to be a lot of information I'm going to learn, even entertaining and informative. But it's not for me. I can't do it. It's for somebody else, because there's a part of you that's going to fight this because the primitive brain doesn't want to give up these addictive type pleasures that you keep getting when you keep imbibing in this high caloric rush food. So these foods, sugar, SF, S/F means sugar and flour, are anti-nutrients. They remove nutrients out of the body. They create these and accelerate death. And nutritional starvation leads to overeating. You can't help but want more food and want more food all the time because you can't even take sugar and flour and turn it into energy efficiently because you're losing the cofactors to turn it into energy. So you're eating and you still feel fatigued, actually. So on the other hand, we're talking about maintaining a strong body without body fat or with low body fat levels. Because we're controlling the aging process with the amount of calories you eat. And I'm saying that as you eat foods that are rich in micronutrients, foods that contain phytochemicals, antioxidants, and fiber, it makes you desire less calories. And when you eat a diet that's low in nutrients, you're going to desire more calories, of course, right? So I'm saying this H equals N over C, or eating a diet that's moderately calorically restricted, becomes instinctual when you eat a diet that's rich enough in nutrients. So even I said the American population is accelerating their death by eating a lot of food that doesn't contain nutrients. They eat a diet low in nutrients per calorie, and we want a diet with a high micronutrient, a high nutrient per calorie ratio, or bang, right? A high nutrient bang per caloric buck. And I'm saying to you, as you achieve a high nutrient bang per caloric buck and start eating these high nutrient foods like G-bombs, G-B-O-M-B-S, greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, seeds, as you eat these foods that are rich in nutrients, as you eat more natural foods, particularly green vegetables, particularly vegetables, your appetite goes down, and you start to lose your desire for so many calories. And when your diet gets healthy enough, you start to instinctually desire the right amount of calories only to maintain your lean body mass. There's no extra desire for foods that would have had you gain any weight. And your weight would naturally shrink to the point where your body fat would be low. Because you know that most Americans are overweight, right? Actually, the American health authorities tell us that 77% of Americans are overweight or obese. And they define an overweight person as having a BMI above 25 and an obese person as having a BMI above 30. And I'm saying that's not quite accurate, at least I wouldn't define it that way, because we know that the longest lived people and the people who live to be, over the age of 90 are always have BMIs for women below 21 and for males below 22. The optimal BMI for lifespan for a woman is between 18 and 21, and for males between 19 and 22. So using a BMI of 25 as the demarcation line between normal weight and overweight is a little bit inaccurate, because if we use 23, which is permissive enough as the demarcation line between overweight and underweight, except for some extremely muscular people, then we'd find that 89% of Americans are considered overweight, not 77%. Okay, so let's consider that about 89%, 90% of Americans are overweight, and let's look at the 10% that are not overweight for a little bit, okay? Because of the 10% that are not overweight, most of those people are people who smoke cigarettes or alcoholics or some mental conditions, medical conditions keeping them at a normal weight or underweight. Most of the people who are of normal weight are not healthy. Only 2.4% of Americans are at a normal weight because they eat healthfully, relatively healthfully, and exercise regularly. That's 2.4%. The point I'm making with this is that if you were healthy and eating the American diet, you would become overweight like all the other Americans. If you're a normal weight in the American diet, most likely something's wrong with you, because the American diet is so dangerous and overweight causing. And fat cells are not a cosmetic issue. They're a dangerous lifespan issue, because fat on the body spews out cytokines and lipokines, pro-inflammatory substances, because fat cells don't get a great blood supply. They spew more free radicals, these toxins into the body. And then your increased risk of infection, pneumonia. If you got something like COVID, your chance of dying is higher. But the fat cells also raise estrogen production. And the higher estrogen promotes prostate cancer and breast cancer. And fat cells also make you insulin resistant. So it's not just people who are pre-diabetic and diabetic that have those problems. I consider all overweight people to be pre-diabetic because when you have excess fat on your body, the fat proportional to the amount of fat that's there blocks the insulin receptor, makes it block so it doesn't work well, and then your body has to produce called insulin resistance, and then your body has to make more insulin to get the glucose out of your bloodstream. So if the person who's overweight, if their glucose looks normal and they don't have diabetes, I'm saying they still have a condition that's pre-diabetic, even with a normal glucose, because their insulin level, if measured, would be high. And the high insulin is a hormone that promotes fat storage, drives excess appetite, and promotes angiogenesis. Angiogenesis, the word angio means relating to blood vessels, and genesis means to make new. So it means to make new blood vessels. So because insulin is a primary fat storage hormone, it's driving sugar out of the blood and making it grow fat. So it needs to grow blood vessels to feed the fat with nutrients and oxygen. So you have to grow blood vessels to fuel the growth of fat. In doing so, the angiogenesis promotion now promotes cancer cells to grow and allow cancer cells to get a blood supply to replicate for tumors to form and to spread in your body. So being overweight causes increased risk of cancer. So it doesn't just cause increased risk of heart disease. So I'm just giving some of the mechanisms via which eating excess calories slows accelerates lifespan, accelerates the rate at which you're aging. And we're describing some of them here because lower calorie, high nutrient intake is the opposite of high calorie, low nutrient intake, right? It's the opposite of what Americans are eating. They're eating 60% of calories from processed foods and 35% of calories from animal products. And the processed foods are things like, white flour, bagels, muffins, soft drinks, pasta, bread, salad oils, mayonnaise, donuts, cookies, rice cakes, breakfast bars, chips, breakfast cereals. They're all eating all kinds of garbage, and which don't have much of doesn't have a significant micronutrient load in them. They're just calories with no micronutrients. And then they're eating 35% of calories from animal products, which also are rich sources of calories, but no antioxidants or phytochemicals. They're not nutrient rich with the nutrients that we're missing from the processed foods. Americans are only eating 2% of vegetables, 2%, 9% of produce, 2% of vegetables, and that 2% and that 9% includes ketchup and potatoes, is in that category. Look, use my body as an example, just for a second. So here I am at about 150 pounds. It's a nice round number. Now let's just say my basal metabolic need for calories is about 1,500 calories a day, not considering exercise, just at rest. Now what if I had an extra chocolate chip cookie every day, just one, or one bagel a day extra, and instead of having 1,500, I had 1,700? Well, 3,500 calories equal to 1 pound of body fat, and there's 350 days in a year. So for each 100 calories extra a day, I'd put on 10 pounds after a year, or for extra 200 calories, I'd be 170 pounds after a year, not 150 pounds, right? No, it's wrong. It's not what happens. Because your body knows how dangerous it is to put on weight. So when you eat extra calories, it doesn't go to putting on fat. It revs up your metabolism. So you now burn more calories by the body temp. You raise your body temperature, your furnace runs higher, your breathing accelerates to burn more calories, and your thyroid function goes up. Your body sets into motion a series of biological events to try to burn off the calories. So after the year, I've only gained 10 pounds, not 20 pounds. But you've made this pact with the devil. Because the raising the metabolic rate has now burned down your telomeres fast, which means the telomeres are the measurement of your biological age, not your chronological age. So you can have the telomeres of a 60-year-old, but you're 50. Or you can have the telomeres of a 40-year-old and you're 50. But if you want your telomeres to shorten so the cells lose their ability to replicate, they age faster, you can just increase those extra calories and run your engine higher. You know how the average American thinks it's better to have a higher metabolic rate so they can eat more food and not get heavy and not get as fat, right? And we know the opposite is true. It's better to have a slower metabolic rate so you can age slower, and so that it's better so I can slow down my metabolic rate so I can eat less food and not get too thin. How much food should you eat? Probably as little as possible without becoming too thin, maintaining your strength and size of your muscles, and eat as little as you can without getting too thin. So what I'm saying is that the overweight Americans aren't overshooting their caloric load by a little bit, a few hundred calories a day, or for 50 or 25 calories a day. They're overshooting the calories they need by hundreds of thousands of calories. When a person is overweight, they're not eating a little bit extra food they shouldn't eat. They're eating a lot of extra food they shouldn't eat. Did you follow that? Because half of the stuff they shouldn't eat wouldn't even cause them to become overweight. They're eating, it's turned into disease and aging. So sorry about that. I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm telling you this for your own good. I'm trying to have goodwill that there is no such thing as a healthy overweight person. There's no such thing. People want to take that message and like embrace that message, but it's just not true. And there's no such thing as a healthy person eating an American-style diet. It can't happen. Your body is not designed that way. We're a green vegetable-dependent animal. Gorillas in the wild don't have heart attacks. Only gorillas in captivity, feeding kibble and junk food, have heart attacks. Humans in the natural wild will never have any heart attacks. And obviously my career over the last 40 years has demonstrated all these people who have diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure, and they adopt this nutritarian diet style, and their blood pressure normalizes, they go off their blood pressure medications, their diabetes goes away, they go off their diabetic medications, their chest pains go away, and they live to be 95 to 105 years old. And I'm going to show you a lot of those people. I'm going to show you a bunch of them at the end, okay? A bunch of people who reverse to life. So this is only the second or third slide. Here it is. Review what you learned so far. We're talking about reducing the inflammatory response, suppressing genetic alterations that could cause autoimmune disease or cancer. So when you go to a doctor and he says to you, oh, well, you know, it's aging, it's genetic, you've been misinformed, you're brainwashed. You always have an excuse why people get sick. It's not aging if you develop heart disease or high blood pressure. It's not genetic if you develop breast cancer. Even the BRCA1 gene and the GSTP1 gene have a minor effect compared to your lifestyle and your diet. There's no breast cancer years ago when people ate healthy foods, and there's no breast cancer, and even there's studies on that. There's studies on the BRCA gene and the GSTP1 gene where people have an increased risk of breast cancer, and scientists call it gene silencing. With green vegetables and mushrooms and onions in the diet, those abnormal genes don't get a chance to be expressed. Food controls your genes much more than genetics do, and food has the ability to cause gene silencing of any abnormal genes, putting you at higher risk. So we slow the metabolic rate, and don't forget, if I undershoot my calories by 50 calories a day over my basal metabolic need, do I lose? If I went to 100 calories less a day, would I be 10 pounds lighter? No. My body knows that this is my best weight because my body fat's already at 10%, it's already very low. I utilize my muscles regularly with exercise. It gives my body the signal to keep the muscles because he's utilizing them. So my body is resistant to losing weight. So what happens when I cut my calories down a little bit? It slows down my metabolism. My body runs a little colder, but I still stay almost at the same weight. I may drop 2 pounds in a year, but you're not going to drop a lot of weight if you... So that's the art. The art is getting your diet dialed in, idealized, so you're at your most favored weight for your longevity, to maintain the right amount of muscle size and mass and strength with low body fat, and not eat so you become excessively thin, but you can't be healthy if a male has a body fat above 15%, or if a female has a body fat above 25%, you can't be healthy. Some fat is normal, of course, but the excessive fat going up, and your risk goes up as the percent increases. Many Americans are running around with 30, 40, and 50% body fat. So reducing your body temperature, and by the way, if I measured your thyroid function, in the normal range of free T4, the normal range of thyroid, within that normal range, the top half are at double the risk of heart disease or developing atrial fibrillation or irregular heartbeats compared to people in the lower half of thyroid function, the lower half of normal. It's better to have a relatively slower metabolic rate with lower production of thyroid hormone, and you need less thyroid hormone when your body weight is lower and you're eating less food. So vegetables protect the DNA, and we can see these cells under the electron microscope, and we can see the cell gradually becoming prone to cancer, achieving that precancerous stage, and then moving into a cancerous stage as the methylation defects accumulate in the cells. But I'm bringing this up to let you know that the science has advanced, that we can now diagnose cancer, for example, 10 years before a woman with a mammogram can show a mass. You can have a blood biopsies, these new technologies that can show cancer way before it's even visible to the human eye. The point I'm making right here is even before that it could be diagnosed as cancer, 10 years prior to that, you see methylation defects starting to accumulate and the cell moving in that direction. Eventually it becomes cancerous. 10 years later it forms a mass. It's a slow process of decades to develop cancer, and it's linked to the accumulation of DNA methylation defects, which are prevented by the consumption of green vegetables. We're a green vegetable dependent animal. So I'll ask you, how about you guys, right over here? What food do you think is the food that is most protective against cancer of almost any food you can eat? You're giving me examples of that category of food. You're right. The answer is green vegetables, particularly green cruciferous vegetables have the most powerful anti-cancer effects. Correct. Now you guys over here, this group right here, different question, completely different question. Forget cancer. What food's most protective against heart disease? Prevents inflammation in the endothelial, doesn't allow plaque to build up in your arteries, prevents causing a clot. What's the food most protective against heart attacks or strokes? You guys know the answer. That's right. And you guys over there, forget those answers, forget that. What's the food that's most protective against dementia and losing your mental faculties as you age? What food's most protective? Right, green vegetables. We are green vegetable dependent animals, just like the other primates. We're only 1/26th of a chromosome different from a gorilla. We're green vegetable dependent. Americans don't eat any vegetables, or hardly any green vegetables at all. I always say, if you don't like green vegetables, then you better live close to a hospital. It's not going to really help you. But I love coming here to Utah because I love to ski. I come here probably every 2 weeks to go skiing. But I skied this morning. You know, I went to 2 ski areas today. 2. You know why? I went to Alta this morning, but it was all groomed. There was no bumps. So I looking around for bumps, looking around for something difficult. I couldn't find anything. It was all just catted smooth. So I got in my car and drove to Solitude. And then I found like bump runs on Solitude that could give me some exercise. Luckily, I have the Icon Pass. It doesn't cost anything. I can jump from one ski area to another, you know. All right, getting back to the lecture here. So we have populations like the Fiji Island studies, where people in Fiji smoke like fiends, but they don't get lung cancer. They compared the lung cancer rate in Fiji, where they smoke a lot, compared to the lung cancer rate in Hawaii, where they don't smoke much, and the lung cancer rates were higher in Hawaii because they eat less green vegetables. You know, I always say, coming out here skiing, that's why I was bringing it up, because when I'm thinking of all these people that like to live near the ski slopes, especially avid skiers, they can jump out of their condo or jump out and get right on the slope fast. It reminds me of people getting some nice condos and homes with like lift lines or trams right into the waiting rooms and into the hospital emergency rooms, into the doctor's offices. They can just go right back and forth from their homes right to the hospitals and get back and forth nice and easy. Another stupid joke, but you know, you live longer if you smile and laugh, by the way. That's good for your health. And the joke would be really stupid, Doesn't have to be funny, just laugh anyway and smile. It makes you live long. It's good for your health. Okay, so I want you to memorize this. Because I told you to memorize those 5 words, right? So I want you to memorize these 10 words, or about 11 words. Let's go into these 10 words right now. Raw vegetables have the most consistent and powerful association with the reduction of cancers of all type. Can you memorize that? Let's do it one more time together. Raw vegetables have the most consistent and powerful association with the reduction of cancers of all types. Because that's why my mantra is make salad the main dish. At least once a day, have a large salad. That's what I do. At least once a day, have a big salad. And you know, how well you chew the salad depends on the cancer potential of that salad, because you have to break open the cells to form the ITCs, the isothiocyanates, in the mouth. Because you guys said green cruciferous vegetables, and you guys said green cruciferous vegetables. For some reason, you recognize that as being powerfully anti-cancer. But let me ask you, are the ITCs that prevent cancer in the green vegetable, are they in the green vegetable when it's sitting there in your salad bowl? No, they're not there yet. The precursor to the ITC that's there is there. You have to chew it first to make the ITC. Because when you're chewing the cell wall, you break open a packet that houses the myrosinase enzyme that forms the ITCs in a chemical reaction in your mouth as you chew. And you only form the amount of ITCs based on the amount of cells you opened up and crushed. And most people eating a salad don't even crush 80% of it. They crush like 20%. So if you can try to be mindful of chewing your salad, to liquefy, take your time and really make it, don't swallow it quickly, leave it in the mouth longer, mix it with saliva more, keep chewing until it's more liquefied, till you break open more cell, you've heightened the anti-cancer effects by 20-fold, or 54, yeah, 20-fold, because you're going from a... And what if you put a dressing with some nuts and seeds in the salad, like a walnut, balsamic, or my favorite, like an orange cashew sesame with blood orange vinegar, a little lemon, peeled navel oranges, toasted sesame seeds, cashews. I love that dressing. Or I love a dressing made out of like a rich tomato sauce with lots of roasted garlic, and you put in some almonds in there and some black fig vinegar, make a delicious dressing like that too. But you see, the dressings have the nuts in them, and a little bit of nut fat facilitates the absorption of the anti-cancer phytochemicals into the bloodstream more effectively. So you also now absorb the production of the anti-cancer chemicals are absorbed 20 to 50 times better if you have some of that fat in with your salad, or in the meal that you're eating the salad with. Did you follow that? Like, you could eat the salad with nothing on it and then eat some walnuts separate, and it would still have the same effect. Now, this slide said vegetables and cancer, and this slide says vegetables and endothelial function. It's the same thing as me asking you, green vegetables for heart disease, green vegetables for cancer, right? It's the same thing. It's saying now regard to heart disease, not just cancer, now we're looking at heart disease, and the meta-analysis of all the studies show that as vegetable portions a day increase in people's diets, the intravascular inflammation that can cause heart disease decreases and disappears, and elasticity and function improves, bringing you back to a more youthful and elastic blood vessel. You know, in the study on the Catawba Island studies and the study on the Kamumu Indians who live in the Amazon jungle, they find that these people don't salt their food and eat natural foods, and the blood pressure of toddlers is the same as the blood pressure of teenagers, which is the same as the blood pressure of middle-aged people, which is the same as the blood pressure of the elderly. You don't see blood pressure rise with people when they aged. All through life, it was all the same blood pressures. Amazing, right? In this country, even by the time a person is 8 to 10 years old, they already have blood pressure that's different from a toddler blood pressure. By the time they're middle-aged, they all have high blood pressure. Maybe your doctor's not high enough for your doctor to diagnose you with high blood pressure, but it's high blood pressure compared to what's ideal. And then you get older, and it really gets even higher and higher. You keep eating and having salt on your food and oil on your food, and you keep doing these things, it wears down and reduces the elasticity and function of blood pressure, because look, your blood vessel's supposed to be elastic and move in and out. It's the second heart, meaning the heart crunches and explodes the blood to your whole body, and then how does the blood get back from your feet or your head back to the heart or lungs again? Well, because the peripheral blood vessels expand and snap back elastically like a balloon, and they snap back and push the blood back to your heart. As you age and the blood vessels get stiffer, they don't expand when the heart pumps, so the systolic blood pressure gets higher, and they don't contract enough to bring the blood pressure back, so the diastolic blood pressure can get too low, so it's called an increasing pulse pressure, loss of elasticity, loss of movement of blood vessels, which is the factor that most predicts a premature death, or a death from a heart attack or a stroke, is the loss of elasticity in your blood vessels. And how do you maintain elasticity or bring back elasticity to your blood vessel when they've already become stiffened? You have to cut out the salt and you have to eat more green vegetables. So green vegetables increase elasticity, reducing heart attack and stroke risk. So you're learning from me that the same foods that protect against cancer protect against heart disease. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about nuts and seeds, because all these major studies, and there's more than 20 separate major studies with high credence value. The word high credence means that the study goes on for decades. Maybe they studied the population for 25 years, and they looked at what was the age of the people when they died and what they died of. Was this study have a large number of people, hundreds of thousands of people, a lot of deaths, a lot of decades of study to see the effects? And when we look at these large-scale studies going on for decades, we see that the findings show a high degree of corroboration, which means that one study shows the same thing as the other study shows. And they all show that as your fat consumption comes from nuts and seeds, as opposed to coming from the way Americans eat fat, from animal fats or oils. So nutritarian diet, the fat comes from nuts and seeds. On the American diet, the fat comes from animal fats and oils. You followed that, right? So as we eat nuts and seeds, we see a dramatic reduction in all causes of death, including cancer death and heart attack death, and a dramatic increase in longevity. And now in the 7-day Adventist studies done in California, a blue zone, very high credence, important studies in the history of nutritional science, because the Seventh-day Adventists advocate not smoking, not drinking, taking care of your health through eating healthy food and not eating much animal products, eating more plant-based diet. So the people are already a healthier population than the standard American population because of what they're being taught. And then they're looking at the modulation of nuts and seeds, even on people that are already eating healthy. So it's not like people are saying they're eating the nuts instead of eating butter and greasy food and fried food. They're eating people that are eating nuts on a plant-based diet where they're mostly eating vegetables, and some are eating some eating nuts and some not eating nuts. And they found that the low-fat vegans, those eating plant-based diets that were not eating nuts, didn't live as long as those people who are eating mostly plants or vegans who weren't eating nuts. So we're not talking about just substituting nuts instead of animal fats or butter or oils. We're talking about just eating nuts in place of that, even compared to a low-fat diet. Because a lot of people mistakenly think that because the studies on breast cancer and heart disease show that as American fat consumption goes up, so does breast cancer rate go up. And as American fat consumption goes up, so does heart disease rate go up. So you think simplistically, but incorrectly, that fat is the bad guy. And you don't realize that it's the type of fat that's going up. Americans are getting their fat from oil and animal fats. We don't throw all the nuts and seeds out the window because eating animal fats and oils make it look bad. Did you follow me? It's like saying, as sugar goes up in the diet, so does cancer, breast cancer, so we shouldn't eat any fruit. Do you follow me? No, fruit is not the same thing as eating sugar. And by the way, when you eat these G-bombs, when you eat these greens and beans and onions, particularly the two raw foods, raw green vegetables and raw onion or scallion, and I'm including lettuce in that, because don't forget, lettuce is a superfood. Lettuce is very low in oxalic acid, which means all the calcium is absorbable, and it's very high in sulfoquinavose, the fuel that fuels the healthy bacteria in the gut. There's tremendous amount of health-giving benefits from eating just simple lettuce, green lettuce. But these raw foods, lettuce and onion or scallion, and these two cooked foods, the cooked legumes and the cooked mushrooms, work to build the most favorable type of bacteria, the most favorable microbiome in the digestive tract. And what happens is you get a thick and robustly healthy biofilm that covers the villi, the finger-like projections in the small intestines. And the biofilm that covers the villi now slows the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream. So now, when you have the mango or the oatmeal, it's relatively low glycemic because you have such a healthy microbiome. So you had because you're eating the beans and the greens and the onions and the mushrooms regularly. So what you eat at one meal affects your digestion and health from the other meal. But now we're talking about nuts, and we're talking about, for example, in the Physician's Health Study, because the ALA, these fatty acids from walnuts and flax seeds and hemp seeds and these fats in nuts, stabilize the myocytes in the heart, the myocardium, so against getting arrhythmia like atrial fibrillation. And that's why in the Physician's Health Study, people ate at least 1 ounce of nuts a day had a 60% reduction in sudden cardiac death. There's no food that showed as much protection in heart attack death compared to eating nuts and seeds or not eating nuts and seeds. So here we're looking at the fact that not only do they improve elasticity and lower LDL, but the nuts and seeds, because the fat is bound to fibers called sterols and stanols, that the fat is released so slowly into the bloodstream, but these fat magnets that hold on to fat pull fat out of the bloodstream into the digestive tract for removal into the stool. So when you eat nuts and seeds, it increases stool fat. You could say that all the fat is not absorbed, but it's not really that all the fat is not absorbed. It's that we're moving fat out of the body into the stool. So when you think you're eating 200 calories from nuts and seeds, and it made you feel like you ate 200 calories, you really didn't eat 200 calories, because maybe 40 of those calories were into the toilet bowl. So you felt satisfied, but you really ate less calories. Just like when you eat beans. You think you're eating 200 calories of beans, but the beans are so high in resistant starch that are resistant to digestion that they are fermented by bacteria in the gut so far down in the digestive tract that the fats they produce go into the toilet bowl. So even though you felt like you had all those calories and you're satisfied, your appetite and your apostat are both satisfied, you really didn't eat all the calories you thought you ate. So you're moderately calorically restricting. Whereas if you and by the way, the fat that goes into the toilet bowl, it pulls out oxidized LDL, not just regular LDL. The more oxidation, the more is removed into the toilet, which means that's the most dangerous actor causing heart disease. In other words, it's dramatically lowering not just the LDL molecule, but the worst type of LDL when you eat nuts and seeds, giving you cardiovascular protection. And of course, the 1 serving a day of nuts in the meta-analysis, looking at all the studies, looking at more than 44,000 deaths, showing a tremendous 40% decrease in cardiovascular mortality. The same 40% we saw in the 7-Day Adventist Health Study 2 with only 2,000 deaths. They all showed about a 40% reduction in cardiovascular mortality and about a 30% reduction in cancer mortality. It's pretty amazing, right? That this is just changing oil to nuts. So what if we had a buffet here at the front of the room? Let's go over this for a minute. I have this buffet, and you guys are waiting to get your food on the buffet. But while you're waiting in line, I give you a tablespoon of olive oil to eat on the way to the buffet. Now, a tablespoon of olive oil is 120 calories. So you would think that if the scientists came up here and started weighing and measuring everything you ate, you would think you would eat 120 calories less compared to the group not getting the olive oil on the way to the buffet. But no, because it doesn't take up any bulk in the stomach, and because there's not any fiber with it, because don't forget, fiber is a major controller of how much calories you eat, because the apostat in the central nervous system in the brain, the hypothalamus, is controlled by a compound called butyrate, which is broken down from fiber and resistant starch. They're short-chain fatty acids, SCFA, short-chain fatty acids. The most powerful one on reducing appetite is butyrate. And the short-chain fatty acids work on the GTP1 receptors as well as the brain's detection of butyrate to decrease your appetite. So fiber becomes the major controller of appetite, and there's no bulk or nutrients to be measured by the body. And there's no water weight in there, so the people don't eat less calories. And so as opposed to this group, When you were waiting to get to the buffet at the front of the room, I gave you a 65-calorie apple to eat on your way to the buffet, and the scientists would have detected that you ate 65 calories less because the fiber and the bulk and the water content and the nutrient content and the weight of the apple made you just consume less food. But what if I tricked you and I mixed the oil in with the food? I served a little rice, a little salad, and I just put like an extra 150 calories of oil into the meal. Then when you went to the buffet, you'd probably still eat 150 calories more, right? No, not right. Oil is an appetite stimulant. It works on the center in the brain. It makes people eat more food. If I mix the oil in the food, if I mix the salt in the food, I mix the sugar in the food, you're going to want to consume more food. That's why that if you go to a fast food restaurant, they're not just giving you French fries. They're not putting potatoes and frying them in oil. They're going to take the potato and they're going to make a potato batter. They're going to put more salt and sugar in the potato batter. They're going to freeze it, then slice it so it looks like a potato, and then they're going to fry it. Because now with the extra salt and sugar in the potato, you want to eat more potatoes. And when it's frying it, you want to eat more food. They have all the techniques down. They even put sugar and salt in the burger meat to make you want to drink more and eat more. And of course, they put oil and fat and put the oil, the fat, rapidly digestible fats into almost all foods to make you want to eat more calories. So the person coming in with the buffet will just take more food if there's oil in it. Because they're not, because their central nervous system, apostat, will be turned on and the receptors in the brain will be lit up from the extra oil and the extra calories in the food. You follow me? So here's just some studies, some studies that I published. That study on top was published in the International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention with more than 50 references demonstrating even that people have heart disease, to prevent and reverse heart disease, the exclusion of nuts to shrinking their diet is better off when it's lower in fat, is making it more risky, and then get more protection with the moderate inclusion of nuts and seeds to protect the heart. And here's the bottom study is showing more than 450 people lowered their blood pressure back to normal again within 6 months of following a nutritarian diet. It actually dropped their systolic blood pressure by 26 points on the average, while the medications were being taken away, which was the most blood pressure lowering of any study that I'm aware of that's ever been done. And of course, that study had individuals who had very advanced and dangerous life-threatening heart disease that reversed itself, and people were able to come back to normal, have normal ejection fraction, and not have chest pains and have their hearts open up again. So we're talking here about heart disease recovery, and I'll show you that as well. So getting back to this concept of nuts versus olive oil or nuts versus oil, sure, olive oil is a better choice than butter, saturated fats, coconut oil, canola oil. It's a better choice. And having no fat in your diet isn't good either. This is the Prevamid study, which showed that when they told people to take extra virgin olive oil, they actually lowered heart attack rates by 15%. By that was having to take home bottles of extra virgin olive oil. Maybe those people ate less butter, other worse sources of fat. Olive oil is a better source of fat. When they took the oil away, the group that was told to eat nuts and seeds instead of oil dropped their heart attack risk by 60%, not by 15%. So even though oil's better than butter, and oil's better maybe even than no fat, but it's still not in the range of protection you get from eating real food. Oil is not a real food. You don't see oil growing on trees. Right? All over the forest, there are pine trees with pine nuts. Those have fat in them, but they're real food, not the oil extracted from that food. Now, this is that slide which I showed you. Americans eat about 9% of produce, and the rest of it's processed foods and animal products. And I'm saying a piece of chicken is like a bagel. Why am I saying a piece of chicken is like a bagel? Anybody?
No fiber.
Yeah, but there's no micronutrient load. Where's the vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and antioxidants? They're both examples of macronutrients with no significant micronutrient load. But the chicken is also like the bagel because they're both hormonally unfavorable. Hormonally unfavorable to drive cancer because the bagel pushes up insulin and the chicken pushes up insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1. They're both not hormonally favorable foods. So the second principle of the nutritarian diet, we've talked about a little already. We're talking about the diet has to have the right amount of calories, want to have a favorable body weight, and we also want it to be hormonally favorable. That means we don't want to have a diet to be high in high glycemic foods like sugar, honey, maple syrup, and white flour products. Because insulin, estrogen, and IGF-1, if elevated, shorten lifespan and increase risk of cancer. So on insulin to be lower, a commonality of all healthy centenarians is that they're insulin sensitive, so the body doesn't have to make a lot of insulin. Their insulin levels are low to live a long time. And a commonality of people who are living longer and don't get cancer is their IGF-1s are relatively low, and most Americans, the IGF-1 is excessively high, and it's dialed up or down based on the amount of animal products or animal protein you eat, because the extra animal protein you consume isn't as readily converted into fat on the body, so it's converted more into growth hormone. The body makes more growth hormone when you eat more animal protein, whereas when you eat plant protein, like green vegetables and beans and nuts and when you're eating quinoa, these foods that are high in plant protein, the body doesn't have excessive amounts coming in all at one time, and the body can combine the proteins to make the hormone it needs without overshooting the amount of hormones to make an excessive amount. But when you eat extra calories from animal products, what do you think your body does with the extra calories? It doesn't need. It turns it into growth hormone. And the growth hormone then drives cellular replication and body growth, and the body growth turns into promotion of cancer. So we're saying there's a strong relationship between both the glycemic load, which is the amount of sugar rushing in the bloodstream, and this slide looks familiar. It's the same graph I used to demonstrate the term caloric rush, right? The glycemic load means how fast sugar is going into the bloodstream compared to sugars that food that goes into it, lower glycemic, right? And the high glycemic load diet, with more white potato and white rice and white bread and white flour and more sugar and honey, is linked to cancer and heart disease and dementia. And we know that the insulin resistance, and we've talked about body fat increasing insulin resistance, but also having more saturated fat distorts the shape and function of the insulin receptor. So you get more of your fat from animal products, which are higher in saturated fat, or coconut, which is higher in saturated fat. You develop more insulin resistance, and now the insulin receptors don't work. So this person on a keto diet, they're eating mostly animal products and very little carbohydrate, says to me, look, I can't eat oatmeal or mango because my sugars will get too high. Well, of course, your postprandial sugars will get too high because your diet's so high in saturated fat, and even though you're not relative that overweight, the saturated fat destroyed the your insulin receptors, so now you have to produce more insulin in response, and you produce a higher glucose load. Also, all the meat you were eating create more gram-negative bacteria, and the gram-negative bacteria create an inflammatory compound called TMAO, or trimethylamine oxide, which then causes chronic inflammation on the interior lining of blood vessels, accelerating heart disease or atherosclerosis, even if your body weight is relatively lower. So it's a dangerous way to keep your glucose down is by cutting out all the carbohydrates. It's much more effective for long-term health if you eat healthy carbohydrates. You don't eliminate one complete food group. So I'm showing you some examples and to score carbohydrates on a hierarchical scale of quality to show that as you go up the scale from corn to peas to lentils to beans, you see that resistant starch and fiber go up, and the slowly digestible carbohydrates also go up. Beans have the lowest glycemic, they're the lowest glycemic carbohydrate, and they have the most slowly digestible starch in them. So a person who has a metabolic hindrance to weight loss, they're diabetic, they're overweight, they need to get under control, then we're feeding them beans as their major carbohydrate source because it's lower glycemic load, it's higher in protein, and also because it has more resistant starch, which means they're satisfied with less calories that makes it very satisfying to eat the beans, but then all the calories don't even get absorbed, which means that if all the carbohydrate calories aren't being absorbed, and the bean is 30% protein, and you're losing 20% of the calories due to being resistant starch, that means the protein isn't really 30% out of the amount of totally absorbed calories. It's really like 35% or 40% more than meat as a percent of calories that were actually absorbed from the bean. Did you follow that? It's just like when people put oil on their food, they don't realize they're extracting protein from their food. When they're pouring oil, see, if you had the fat or those calories from having nuts, almonds, sunflower seeds, hemp seeds, pignolias, pistachio nuts, you'd be getting your fat mixed with protein. But if you take the pistachio oil, the walnut oil, or the almond oil instead of the nut, then you created an amount of your calories, 300 calories that day, and the average American consumes 400 calories from oil a day, or 400 or 500 calories of oil a day. That's 400 calories that with no protein. So their diet could be potentially, I did an analysis of this showing that people on a nutritarian diet had higher levels of protein, of plant proteins, than a lot of people that were eating some animal products. Because the people that were eating some animal products diluted the protein down so much because they were eating so much sugar and oil in their diet, which had zero protein. So many calories they got from nothing. Whereas everything you get in a nutritarian diet has some protein. You follow me? We're going to talk about that more. But I'm talking here how incredibly protective beans are and linked to longer lifespan. In all blue zones and all populations live a long time, the hallmark of their diet is that they eat beans. Very, very protective food. And you get used to digesting them when you eat them regularly. A person that gets a lot of gas and bloating and can't digest beans well, they may have to start with small amounts. And over a period of weeks and months, they can increase it gradually as the body develops the bacteria to digest them better. But people who have been eating beans for years can digest them much easier, obviously. So IGF-1 is insulin-like growth hormone, and lower levels are better. That means lower levels of animal protein are better because animal products, particularly dairy, raise IGF-1 the most. It's a growth-promoting hormone. Dairy means it's a food made for the baby cow to triple or quadruple its weight in the first 3 weeks of life. So it's designed to cause rapid growth. So it has to be high in IGF-1 promoting amino acids and IGF-1 promotion. It's effective at promoting growth, designed to fuel the growth of a baby cow. And that's why milk drinking is linked to higher rates of breast cancer, and that the countries with the highest rates of breast cancer, like Scandinavian countries, America, Argentina, England, countries that still use cow's products and cow's milk have higher rates of breast cancer because of IGF, and prostate cancer, by the way, accounted for by the higher level of IGF-1. And remember that plant proteins do not raise IGF-1 effectively unless you had isolated soy protein. And that's a processed food anyway, because it's so protein concentrated that it works a lot like an animal product to produce such a high. So these are like protein, the whey protein, the isolated soy protein, the weightlifters are taking to get real big. That's going to accelerate their aging process and increase the risk of cancer down the road. It's not good to try to get overly big by eating these like concentrated proteins. By the way, what profession is the shortest lifespan of any profession in North America? What's the profession that lives the shortest? Close. It's linebackers on football teams die the youngest, but not the quarterback and not the receivers. It's only the linebackers that get to be, or that have to be over 250 pounds because they have to eat a lot of food and a lot of animal products to get that large. You know what I mean? In the olden days, they took steroids, which made it even worse. I remember I was a competitive athlete. I was in the world team in figure skating in the early 1970s. And I'm bringing it up because all the members of the East German Olympic team in 1972 are all dead. They're all dead today. All my contemporaries are dead. They're dead because they used hormones, they used steroids, right? They cheated. And they paid a price for it. They're dead. So IGF-1, I'm just showing a study to show that breast cancer is related to your IGF-1 levels, well established. Here's a meta-analysis of 17 pooled studies showing we can measure your IGF-1 in a blood test. We don't have to because we know it's going to correlate with the animal protein you eat. And we know that the average level in America is 250. The average level in vegans is about 150 or 140. Marathon runners and skinny athletes also have lower levels too. They're about 160, 170. But generally speaking, we don't want it to go too low. We don't want you to be anorexic or eat like your diet to be radically low, like in protein, like a fruitarian, nothing but fruit, because your body protein can get too low, especially as we age. Our protein ability to assimilate and absorb protein goes down with aging, and you get to be over the age of 80. If you're eating a diet all of fruit, you're not going to get enough protein. The design of a nutritarian diet means the beans, the nuts, the vegetables, the whole design, and the grains, the whole diet is designed for the amino acids to complement each other, to be rich in plant protein without having to eat animal products to get significant protein. So here's another slide to demonstrate some of these high credence studies that followed the amount of animal products people were eating and plotted it against the age of cardiovascular death. And finding that people, a score of 20 would be like a carnivore diet. A score of 0 would be a vegan diet where there's no animal products. And they found the risk of cardiovascular death increased with every score number going from 1 to 20. The heart attack rates went up from 5% with every number went up for some points. So we saw a gradual dose-dependent increase in cardiovascular deaths as animal protein and animal products were increased in the diet. And here's a study in 2018 with a 25-year median follow-up showing that more animal protein, more premature death, more plant protein, longer lifespan. And now I'm going to show you just a few more studies that corroborate that. Let me say that again, because these findings were shocking to everybody, including me. I didn't know that the more plant protein you ate, the longer you lived. I knew that animal protein would shorten lifespan, but I didn't know it was so important to eat more plant protein foods. And that means that your diet could be too high in fruit, which is low protein, or it could be too high in olive oil and oils, things that don't have protein in them, because when you eat nuts and seeds as a source of fat, you get a lot of protein. So diluting all these, so here's 4 more studies, and I can show about 5 others or 8 other studies going to that are more recent than this, because this is like 2016, there's 2018, there's 2019, there's 2020, and I have the 20, not in this slide deck, but I have the 21, 22, 23, more studies from different researchers around the world involving more than 1,000 separate nutritional researchers producing scores of studies now that all show the same thing, the same data that is highly significant and irrefutable at this time, that more animal protein makes for more premature death. It doesn't mean a carnivore diet or a keto diet wouldn't have an application. There may be a reason why a person with uncontrolled seizures could want to be in ketosis to control their seizures, or a person who's, let's say, has psychosis or schizophrenia could help control their by being in ketosis may benefit them. But they're still using that diet and going to pay a price with lifespan. It's still not the healthy way to control that. So there's some people so we're trying to get people well without having to use that many animal products. So in any case, this is a review of what you learned so far. Here we're reviewing what you learned. We're saying that on the left side, a diet high in phytochemicals, regular exercise, and under-eating a little bit, or eating, I shouldn't even say under-eating. I shouldn't even say caloric restriction. I should say eating the right amount of calories, not over-consuming calories. Because you know what? Because I eat as much food as I want. But the amount of food I want is the right amount of food. Because my diet is so high in nutrients that I don't feel like overeating. I'm satisfied with the right amount of calories. I'm eating when I feel like eating, but it's the right amount. So I'm not trying to caloric restrict. I'm just trying to eat really healthy. Like I came off skiing yesterday, when I skied yesterday, and I got to give my lecture in Park City, and they walked in and said, here, have one of these giant Dr. Fuhrman salads made with all the ingredients you recommend. And I said, thanks, but could you pack it up and I'll take it home with me? Because I'm not hungry. I just had like a snack after you don't need that much, I didn't need that much food. I want to eat it when I'm hungry, when it's going to taste better, and I want to feel like eating it. I just don't feel like overeating. So I'm saying here that when you eat the right amount of calories and the right kind of food, it elevates the SIRT1 and the AMP kinase, these longevity hormones that stabilize your stem cells, stabilize your telomeres from shortening and aging, and reduce inflammation. And the stem cells are maintained so as you age, they can replace aging tissue and be there to help regenerate your knees and your liver if it needs help, or your kidney or your brain. The stem cells help you heal. It enables your body to heal and repair and to age slower. Whereas on the right side here, the animal protein and excess calories in general, and especially high glycemic foods, activates mTOR, which is elevated in 100% of invasive cancers. Because you need mTOR to be elevated because it's an angiogenesis promoter, and angiogenesis is necessary for cancers to replicate and grow. So now we have increased cell proliferation from higher hormones, increased insulin resistance, turning on cancer-promoting genes, which are turned off by SIRT1, and by antioxidant response element in the cell, turn off cancer-promoting genes. And what food activates the ARE, the antioxidant response element, to turn off cancer-promoting genes? Green vegetables. Direct ability to shut off the gene, the abnormal gene. And of course, we're increasing angiogenesis, increasing oxidative stress. It's a slide that reviews what you've learned so far today. And now this reinforces it, because now we do this study on more than 100,000 Asians looking at their consumption of green cruciferous vegetables. Can you believe it? There's a study on this, studying 100,000, looking at their age of death. And what do you think it showed? It showed that more green vegetables meant for longer lifespan with no threshold effect. Can you believe that? No threshold. I'll explain what that means. It means this. When you eat mushrooms, a tremendous protective effect against cancer. But once you ate half a cup of mushrooms, eating a whole cup or 2 cups or 3 cups is not going to make you live longer. You already had a half a cup. When you have onions, tremendously protective against cancer. The organosulfide compounds reduce cancer rates by 55 to 88%. It's amazing how protective onions are. But when you once eat a half a cup of onion, you've gotten all the protection you need. Eating 2 cups or 3 cups or 4 cups isn't going to grant you more protection. When you have tomato sauce is great for you, but having more than the point is on green vegetables, when they went from 1 cup to 2 cups to 3 cups to 4 cups to 5 cups, people still lived longer with the higher amounts. It was amazing. I was so shocked. How could people eat 5 cups of green vegetables? But it means that it's demonstrating how much we are a green vegetable dependent animal, just like the other primates that are living in the jungles. They sit in the trees and eat leaves all day. I mean, I wouldn't want to try that, but like Tarzan with the apes, living with the apes, and eating all those green vegetables, what would happen is all the raw greens is, my jaw would get hot. You'd be like chewing all day long to get enough calories in, But you probably become too thin, because green vegetables are only like 50 to 60 calories a pound. How many pounds of vegetables would I have to eat to get my caloric needs met, especially if I'm swinging in the trees and climbing on trees all day long? I have to eat a huge amount of green vegetables. But the point I'm making here, what is it making this point for? Because these foods like onions and mushrooms and tomatoes and eggplant and cauliflower, and these foods are naturally low in calories. You don't have to eat thimble-sized portions of food to lose weight. You can eat robust servings and feel like you had enough food. They're naturally low in calories. You're not having to go on some crazy diet where you're eating nothing. And you make them taste good, and you make good sauces and dressings, and they taste delicious, and you're not on a diet. You're just eating healthfully. My goal, my mission, is to make you guys into nutritarians. So it means like you're a health nut. That's what it means. You're eating to live longer, to protect your health, which then increases your creativity and your ability to have full mental function as you age, and then you can enjoy your life more, not just physically, but emotionally and creativity as well. Whatever you want to do, a writer, an architect, an artist, a singer, whatever you want to do, you can do better at what you're doing when you keep your mental faculties intact. Because there's a dose-dependent relationship between eating fast food and commercial baked goods with depression. Even 2 servings a week doubles the risk of depression of commercial baked goods, like croissants and bagels, or fast foods like pizza and burgers and fries and things like that. But 2 servings a week doubles your risk. The average American doesn't eat 2 servings a week. They eat like 15 servings a week, right? Americans are universally dysthymic. And universally dysthymic means, the word dysthymic means they're not so depressed, but they're not so happy or passionate about life. They kind of live to make money in a job they don't like, so they can go out there to the bars and drink or the restaurants and eat and just imbibe in self-destructive substances and to stimulate the brain. They live to stimulate the brain because their life is so meaningless. Because the food makes your brain, makes you more prone to depression, dysthymia, and you lose your passion for living and your excitement and joy of life. We're talking about your happiness quotient, and it's affected by the way you think and by what food you put in your mouth. And I'm also teaching people, for example, when people come to my retreat in San Diego and they want to stay there a few months to lose weight and get rid of their diabetes because they're food addicts, I'm not just teaching them how to eat. I'm trying to build robust emotional health, because with better emotional health, they're more likely to stay with the diet when they go home and not want to eat to relieve stress or to deal with the peer pressure of their friends or neighbors or family trying to pressure them to eat, trying to go after, to approval of other people who are criticizing you for eating healthy or something. They have to be able to deal with that at an emotional level and have wisdom. So when you have green vegetables regularly in your diet, you build up the quality of the intraepithelial lymphocytes. This is the immune system that lines the villi in the small intestines, that protects you against infection and from chemicals from coming in, and from toxins and bacteria and viruses. It's defenders at the gates of the castle. And I'm saying that the digestive tract atrophies, and the failure to eat green vegetables means you have reduced immune surveillance and poor immune protection because you don't regularly eat green vegetables. A lot of the famous athletes that are adopting a nutritarian diet, including my lectures to the US ski team, and one famous adopter of the nutritarian diet, besides the Novak Djokovic and famous tennis players, is Eric Schlappe from Park City, who was on the Olympic team for 16 years. He was in 4 Olympic Games. And the reason he followed a nutritarian diet and came to me for advice and traveled with his blender and put his green smoothies in there and ate all the green vegetables, why do you think he did that? Do you think it made him ski down the hill faster? No. It just made it so he didn't get sick. And when you're a serious athlete, you can't be in bed with a virus for a week in the wintertime. You're not going to have to keep training, and you have to keep well, and you're meeting people on planes, and people are coughing in your face, you're shaking hands, you don't want to get sick. But if you get sick, you might lose some of the ski races where that 1/10 of a point, 1/10 of a second could mean you lost the top 10 or so lost. And if you're just recovering from a cold or something, you're not going to do your best. You follow me? So the athletes are eating this way mostly for better stamina, endurance, and so they can keep training and keep competing without having flus and colds and stuff like that. So here, we're reviewing. We're coming to the end here. We're saying here that more greens, more beans, more nuts and seeds crowd out the stuff you really would think you'd want to eat instead. They're filling. It's very filling, very satisfying, and it means a dramatic lowering of the glycemic load of your diet, and diabetic and cardiovascular parameters, of course the leading cause of death in America, would melt away, disappear. It's unnatural for humans to have heart attacks and strokes. Unnatural. Didn't occur in human history. And gorillas don't have heart attacks and strokes in the wild. You put them into captivity, you feed them kibble, they have heart attacks and strokes. You feed them junk food, they have heart attacks and strokes. So my pyramid, what do you think my pyramid is going to put at the base? Vegetables, all different types of vegetables. And then you can eat, of course, different foods besides the vegetables, like beans and seeds and fruits and nuts and whole grains and potatoes and stuff like that. But processed foods and junk foods, you shouldn't eat, and animal products and oils should be rarely or small amounts in your diet. We don't want those to be a major portion of what you're eating. So a nutritarian eats a variety of high nutrient plants and doesn't eat empty calorie foods, is trying to avoid foods that are self-destructive. Why put things in your mouth? Why drink soda? Why eat candy? Why eat bagels? Why eat French fries? Why eat burgers? Why eat pizza? Sure, it's recreating with food. It's recreation. But there are healthy ways to recreate. You don't have to pay the price. You don't have to pay your price. It's a high price to pay. It's your life, right? The bill comes due. You don't get away with anything. It just comes due decades in your future. You know what I mean? You still got to pay for those things. And your lifetime exposure is important, just like your lifetime exposure to salt. It doesn't matter if you don't have high blood pressure. Right now, oh, my blood pressure is fine, it's low, I can eat all the salt I want. No, it's going to still cause damage to the blood vessels as you eat the salt, whether your blood pressure is high or low. And since 95% of people over the age of 70 have high blood pressure in America, the most likely thing is when you get older, you're going to get high blood pressure anyway, and then it's going to be not that easy to reverse it. In other words, the American Heart Association says the stupidest thing. They say, cut your salt intake way down to only 1,500 milligrams a day when you have heart disease. That is the stupidest thing. That's like saying, when you get lung cancer, quit smoking. You follow how stupid that is? If it's good for a person with heart disease to cut their sodium down, why would they wait till they have heart disease to do it? It doesn't make, it's not scientific. We should be educating because it's your lifetime exposure to these foods. To smoke, your lifetime exposure to smoking cigarettes, your lifetime exposure to, of course, 20 years after you stop smoking, your risk of having lung cancer is not much greater than a person who never smoked. It's still pretty low once you're off cigarettes for 20 years. Just like once you're off salt for 20 years and once you're off sugar for 20 years, the risk of having some of these dangerous things happen is almost incredibly rare. I'm going to show you what happens to people who come later in life and make this switch. They still live to be 100, they still live to be 95 to 100 years old. It's amazing. Even when they live the first 60 or 70 years of their life unhealthy and then they make the switch, it's amazing the miraculous self-healing power of the body. So let's go into some of this. So we're saying here that the prescription, the nutritarian prescription, what you're learning today, is eat at least a half a cup of beans every day, or build up to that over time. So eat at least a half a cup. You may have to start with a tablespoon if you're getting too much gas from them at the beginning, but build up over time to a half a cup a day. Eat at least 3 fresh fruits a day, and at least one of those fruits should be berries or cherries or pomegranate, some of the high polyphenol fruits, like blackberries or blueberries or wild blueberries. And frozen is great. You don't have to have fresh fruit. You can have fresh frozen blueberries or frozen cherries. They're fantastic. At least 1.5 ounces of nuts and seeds a day, but I usually eat more than that because I'm athletic and do a lot more physical activity. I'm not saying 1.5 ounces is the maximum. I'm saying it's the minimum for a person. For a person who's overweight trying to lose weight, they have about 1/2 ounce with each meal. I probably try to go like 1 ounce with each meal, more than that. Eat at least 1 large salad a day. Eat some steamed or wok greens every day, like some broccoli or bok choy or string beans or asparagus or artichokes or zucchini. Eat some, I'm traveling, I just buy some frozen green vegetables, like a frozen box of artichoke hearts, peas, asparagus, broccoli. I just defrost it on my hotel room, and I just put it in a little refrigerator there once it's defrosted. I just eat it right out of the bag or pour it onto the salad or something. I'm trying to not just have a salad every day, but having a robust serving of cooked green vegetables addition to the salad every day. I'm doing both. And I'm eating some mushrooms and onions, mushrooms predominantly cooked and onions predominantly raw, but both cooked onions too. So of course, the average lifespan in America now is 76 for a male and 78 for a woman in America. It's terrible. It's gone down in the last 5 years by 2 years. Lifespan has been decreasing by a few months. Lifespan has gradually been going down for Americans, little by little over the last 20 years. But the last 2 years, it went down a lot because of the growing wastelands of Americans. You would think that the opposite, right? You would think with COVID and all the publicity about diabetes and having high blood pressure and being overweight, increasing your morbidity and mortality from getting infected, you would think that people would wake up and say, look, you're going to die right now. Instead of dying 20 years later, you probably could die this year if you get COVID. You better start cleaning up your acts and eating healthily. But what do you think happened? It didn't work. People just ate more food. It's crazy. It shows you, I think, I'm not sure, it shows you how powerful food addiction is. That even with the face of death, people aren't going to give up these dangerous substances that they're addicted to. How do you get rid of an addiction? How do you get rid of these addictions? Well, it's complicated, but we've been doing this for so many decades now that we have a protocol to help people get rid of their addictions and to learn how to like eating healthfully. So with time, they like the healthy diet as much or more than their unhealthy diet. But it's a transitional period. It takes time. It doesn't happen in a week. You need time to go through that. You got to take the initiative, and you need perseverance and repetition to allow your taste muscle to develop. And you got to learn the recipes, and it takes some learning process for people to get this to be skilled at this. It's a skill because when you develop this nutritarian skill, you don't just live longer. You don't have a deteriorating quality of life. you can maintain your physical ability and mental ability as you age. And let me give you some examples. Here's Pam. And Pam came to me in 1997 with 4 liters of ovarian cancerous fluid, which collapsed her lung. She had 4 liters of ovarian cancer fluid taken out of her lung, given 5 or 6 months to live. And she underwent chemotherapy, but she's alive today, 27 years later, because of her 1997 to 2023. Hey, how many years is that? 28 years? That's a long time. Are there any other people with ovarian cancer you think will live 28 years? Because you know what happens? The chemotherapy kills the rapidly growing cells that are spreading. It doesn't kill all the cells. There's some cells that escape chemo. And 5 years later, or 10 years later, they come back and they kill you because the chemo won't kill them that time because they were the ones resistant to chemo to begin with. So there's a lot of secondary, they extend life a little bit with chemo, but not 27 years later. And so here's another example of Lee Gerstedt, who had metastatic breast cancer, given less than 6 months to live. She refused chemo. You know what happened? To my astonishment, her bone scan cleared and her breast cancer went away. I was like totally, I thought the radiologist got it mixed up with another patient. I made him repeat it a second time. I couldn't believe that her breast cancer disappeared. And those names at the bottom are people, real people with real names who got rid of their breast cancer and ovarian cancer. Karen's lived 20 years, Randy's lived more than 20 years, Sue's lived 20, these people, and Irene got rid of her lymphoma. Her non-Hodgkin lymphoma went away with no treatment. Here's Jody, who showed her recovery from psoriatic arthritis. For example, I was doing an interview this morning where they asked me for some of my best cases, and I said, so many hundreds of them, but what about this girl who was 16 years old with lupus on the National Renal Transplant list waiting for a new kidney, who made a complete recovery from her lupus, and which many, of course, have had scores of people reverse their lupus, but even when the kidney was almost gone, she still came back to normal, and her creatinine went from 4.2 to 0.8. Kidney came totally back to normal again. Like all these people, scores of people with multiple sclerosis who came completely normal. And their MRIs go normalized. Well, here's her psoriatic arthritis going away. Here's her multiple sclerosis going away. She lost over 100 pounds. Here's John. He's the guy on the right. That's 1994. He was 72. I'm in my 70s now, but you can see that years ago I had baggier shirts. It's a stupid joke. But the point I'm bringing him up, here's why I'm bringing him up. Because he was told by his cardiologist he needed an urgent stent placement due to his blocked blood vessels. And I pleaded with him. It was years before I wrote the book Eat to Live, where I didn't know even book to give him then. It was back in 1994, right? I wrote my first book in 1996. So I just had to convince him in my office, John, don't put a stent in, just change your diet. And he listened to me, and he went back to his cardiologist to check up with him 3 months later. Within 3 months, his stress tests had normalized. And the cardiologist said, not only did he say you don't need an angioplasty anymore, he also said to him, I've never seen this happen before in my life. Of course, he sees heart patients all day long, every minute of the day. He's never seen one case get well. And all I see is every case get well, right? Of course, the other point I'm making is that he just passed away at age 100 years old. He was diseased at age 70. He still lived to be 100. And, because that's 2009, I just heard he just passed away. But as he got older, he didn't have high blood pressure. Even though he was on blood pressure medication at the age of 70, his blood pressure got lower as he got older, not higher. His elasticity improved as he got older because he was on the diet longer. Right, here's Steve and Tara. Of course, the numbers on the top mean that Tara weighed 226 and Steve weighed 447. In year 1, of course, they got rid of his diabetes, her sinus infections, his sleep apnea, her depression, there's so many things that got better. And their daughter, Chloe, who lost 32 pounds, got rid of her asthma. But Tara lost 80 pounds, and Steve lost 220 pounds in year 1. You can't even tell it looks like the same people. You would never know they were the same people, right, years later. Pretty amazing, right? And you know who's really thrilled about this? Like super duper thrilled? Look, the dog. She finally has some room to sit in the car. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that one. And now Emily. Look at Emily 1 year later. She looks so much younger. Let's do a close-up of her face in 1 year of losing 100 pounds, do you see how the skin looks more normal? And it even looks more orange. Do you notice how my skin tone might be more orange? Because you can visually see the nutrient density, the carotenoids that color your skin. You can see it in your skin, which demonstrates that every organ, every cell of your body is being penetrated and protected by anti-cancer substances, by higher nutrient density in every cell of your body. You can tell how much better she looks in just 1 year. It looks like her mother on the right, on the left. And so much of what, let's see how the timing. So it's about 8 o'clock. I think we're pretty good on time. Went about because we didn't start till 6:30, so it went about an hour and a half. We're almost done. I'm just going to, the book we have out front, which I'm signing, I don't have that many of them. We only, I think, have 50 or so, but if you want to have that book signed, I'll do that after the lecture. And then I also are going to show a picture of my retreat in San Diego, the back porch, because some people, most people, we want people to do it on their own. But there are some people who just need to go somewhere for more because they have serious problems with control and food addiction, or they want my personal care. They have significant medical conditions. So I want you to know I have a retreat in San Diego where people can come and stay with me for a month or 2 or 3 to facilitate their change to healthy eating.
Okay. Oh, Dr. Fuhrman, thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. Né? And we have some questions from the audience here, from our customers. The first question, Alzheimer's runs in my family.
What runs?
Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's, okay.
Runs in my family. I am terrified of getting it. What do you recommend I do specifically to decrease my chances of getting this disease?
What do you do specifically to dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, or cerebrovascular dementia? You read one of my books and you follow the advice. So you come to one of these lectures like you did today. Maybe that person asked the question before they heard the whole lecture, but you actually got the answer in an hour and a half. And I can go more on this information, but if you want more information, I have a master class on the website that when you come to drfuhrman.com, it gives you 20 lectures, and some are on different diseases, but the first 10 are just going into this in a little more depth. So certainly we have more information if you want to have more information. But this is the way you're going to protect yourself. And I'm saying that you don't have to get demented. I made a mistake. One thing that's important to prevent dementia is your omega-3 index, which is tested by a blood test. It's an important answer, so important question to say this answer, is that it's potentially possible if you're eating a plant-based diet with no seafood, let's say, no fish or sardines or oysters, that your omega-3 fatty acids could be too low. So you may need to take a plant-based or a fish-based oil, plant-based oils that have the omega-3 index, the omega-3 fatty acids in, to make sure your level is above 5.5. So when your omega-3 index is too low, it increases your risk of dementia. So the combination between a nutritarian diet with a satisfactory omega-3 index is the secret sauce to never get dementia. There's one mistake I made personally, I just stopped doing this year. But it probably wouldn't affect you guys. It's from living in California the last 5 years. My favorite food was a cherimoya. Do you know what a cherimoya is, anybody? No? I shouldn't bother telling you this then. But it means that you shouldn't, the cherimoyas from people in the Caribbean eating this tropical fruit have an increased risk of dementia. I mean, this fruit. I didn't know this till real recently, so I stopped eating cherimoyas, but I used to be eating tons of them. That's why I'm so demented now. Okay, let's go to the next question.
Okay, is extended fasting recommended? What fasting strategies do you support?
That's another good question. What fasting strategies I support, and is extended fasting recommended, whether that's juice fasting or water fasting? And, excuse me? Okay, that's a lot of questions. Let's go over that. Intermittent fasting, juice fasting, water fasting. Let's go over that for a minute, okay? Because, by the way, I wrote a book published in 1996 called Fasting and Eating for Health. And I fasted many hundreds of people for therapeutic reasons. But I don't fast people to lose weight when they have a problem with food addiction. I don't fast overweight people to lose weight. I recommend they learn how to eat right and repeat the consistency of the right way of eating over time. Because when you restrict calories that much, it slows the metabolic rate down so excessively, and it makes the food addicted brain obsess about food. So when the fast is done, there's a high probability of them overeating or eating poorly and gaining the weight back and even putting on more weight from the slower metabolic rate from the fast. So I don't recommend it for weight loss purposes, but I do use it therapeutically. I'll give you an example of how I might use it. I have a person who's on asthma inhalers for 20 years, and they're sick of having to breathe and use an inhaler, getting asthma attacks, so can't take exercise class, or waking up in the middle of the night having to use a puffer. And they come to me and say, can you get rid of my asthma? So in a period of 6 months, I'm switched them by removing the beta agonists, by maybe increasing the steroid inhalers, because the beta agonists can inflame the lung, and got them on the right control with a good diet, and they don't need rescue inhalers anymore. That was a little too loud, and then it went away completely. So now, so after a period of months, I'm gradually weaning down their steroids, and they're doing better. And I'm getting to the point where I'm going to stop them and discontinue the steroids completely and see how they do. And at that point, I put them on a fast. I stop the steroids, but the fear of having them, stopping them completely, having them go into a kind of a crisis or an asthma attack, I put them on a fast, which suppresses the immune system so they can't have an asthma attack. And I can go on for 2 weeks where to the point where the body finishes the detox. So now I know they're not going to have another asthma attack. It kind of puts the finishing touches on and makes it safer to stop the medications. So I've used fasting to actually, with rheumatoid arthritis, with people with lots of joint pain, you can take away their pain completely. And then after the fast, we can do substitution and rotation and elimination diet to see what foods they're sensitive to design the diet more specifically to them to keep them free of pain. So fasting does have, it's an important therapeutic tool that can benefit people in their quest to recover from serious illnesses, particularly autoimmune illnesses like connective tissue disease or psoriasis. It can be utilized. But I'm not using it as much as I used to because most of the people that come to see me are people who aren't consistently eating healthfully, and they have problems with the ability to stick with a healthy diet long term. And that is better. They don't, and if you cut calories back too far, if you overdo the caloric restriction, instead of having them eat like 1,300, 1,400 calories a day, if they went down to like 500 calories a day or 800 calories a day, if you push the calories down too far, then they start obsessing about food more. That drives them to want to binge, then they go off the diet. So there's the right art to not to overdo the caloric restriction for a person who has that issue. And so with regard to intermittent fasting, there are some types of intermittent fasting that seem beneficial and other types that are not beneficial. And I'll describe that in a minute. But I just want to clarify something I said, that it doesn't mean extended fasting hasn't helped some people or hasn't helped some people lose weight. It works for some people, but for the majority of people, it's not a good idea. So it doesn't mean it's never worked for people. It just means there's too many people it doesn't work for, and you get less recidivism and better outcomes when you're teaching them how to eat properly, and you don't utilize that. You get more people having better outcomes and less recidivism. With regard to intermittent fasting, it's not good to skip breakfast and and have your meals be later in the day. It's better to eat an earlier and a lighter dinner because the benefits of intermittent fasting accrue when you sleep on an empty stomach because your body goes into more anti-aging phenomenon and reduction of free radicals, and healing takes place when you're not digesting food and when you're sleeping. So you don't heal and repair as much when you're sleeping while you're digesting a big dinner all night long. So the benefit of intermittent fasting has to do with eating dinner earlier and lighter, not skipping breakfast and eating lunch and dinner, but if you want to skip dinner and eat breakfast and lunch. So many people do well on 3 meals a day, and many people do well on 2 meals and a snack. Some women only eat 2 meals a day. So it's a form of intermittent fasting just by pushing your calories a little earlier in the day. At our retreat in San Diego, we serve dinner at 5 o'clock. So by 6 o'clock, everybody has finished eating. So if they go to bed at 10 o'clock, they've had 4 hours with no food coming in to finish digesting before they go to sleep at night. Now I know if I'm eating with the guests and I'm eating that food and it tastes too good and I'm tempted to overeat, need a second dessert, or I can eat more food than these people are eating. And I find that if I overeat at dinner, I can still feel my digestive process going when I go to bed at night. And I ate the right food, I ate a healthy diet, I just ate too much of it, and it prolonged the digestion, so I was sleeping with food in my stomach. So even I can overeat or be tempted to overeat in some cases, but I'm being careful to try not to overeat at dinner so I can go to sleep on an empty stomach. So I'm modulating that, and that's what we try to do. Was that sufficient answer? Covered it all? Okay.
Okay, one more question. I have been seeing a cardiologist and was recently prescribed statin.
Seeing what?
Cardiologist.
Cardiologist, okay.
Thank you. I feel disappointed in myself for getting to this point with my heart health. I love what you said tonight, but I am overwhelmed about where to start. What should I prioritize?
Well, I mean, there are some people that baby step their way in and make changes gradual. It's better for them that way. And some people do better if they jump in with both feet and do it fully. And I'm not saying I have the right answer for you, what works for you the best, but I would suggest if you have a heart disease, why not learn as much as you can about this and go in fully and just reverse your condition? Why should you delay or keep yourself at risk more than you have to? And you know what? When you keep dabbling in those unhealthy foods, dabbing your foot in the water, it keeps lighting the fire under your desire to want them more. It's like the alcoholic going to drink alcohol just on the weekends, but it makes them want to have more alcohol. You want to, okay, you follow the diet, but I'm going to go to a cruddy restaurant, not Aubergine, but a cruddy one, once in a while, just so I can have my cheesecake and my ice cream, my French fries. So just do it once or two. But you know what? It keeps you wanting those foods more. If you stay away from them for abstinence for a few months, you're not going to even think of them or want them anymore. And your taste buds and your taste muscles will change faster. So with heart disease, even though you could go into it slowly and start by having a salad every day and changing your lunch with salad, soup, and some fruit for dessert, and having you make your lunch be perfect every day, and we'll change the dinner later. But no, I think if it would be better in my book to just do it. And that means take some effort to learn this more. Starting with reading the book. You can always come to my website and ask me questions in the website. You can join the Member Center and communicate with me directly. And you get, if you join the website, you can actually get the Eat to Live Masterclass, the 20 lectures. You can get coaching as part of the membership, and you can get the ability to ask me questions directly. So if I were you with a serious illness, I would jump in with both feet and just get rid of it. Whatever's wrong with you, just get well. Why not? Get well.
Great. Another question, are your family members fully committed to health eating? How do you handle when a spouse or children aren't interested in eating health like you?
So the question is, how do you have a good effect on other people and encourage them to live healthier? And obviously it's an art, and it takes practice, and it takes wisdom, and you can't get your ego involved with trying to make yourself look good. You have to really just be kind to the other person and let them get there at their own pace, which means you have to be the role model. You have to walk the walk that you talk. It's more important you get your own health in good shape first. And then you show people you care about them. Like I remember when it relates to the fact that you're not trying to argue or convince a person. You're just trying to show them that you love them. And you're going to love them no matter what they do unconditionally. But because you care about them and you love them, you'd love to share what you're learning with them for a few reasons. Number one, you'd like them to respect and to feel what you've learned that you're excited about, to feel your passion, what you've learned that benefited you, even if they don't want to do it themselves. And number two, you'd like them to move in the right direction because you care about them and want them to be healthy and happy. But still, you have to initially do this with as little pressure as possible. Because if you put too much pressure, the person's going to push away because they weren't here and they didn't learn what you learned here. And maybe introducing them, if they're willing to read, learn more, watch one of the videos, watch one of the YouTube videos. There's all the ways you can get people excited about this. And I've been doing this for so many decades that I've run retreats for a week. And when people come to some of these vacation retreats, like the husband's here to golf. He's not here to listen to you, Dr. Fuhrman. He just wants to come along with me. I'm going to listen to you, but my husband's going to be out there playing golf or out there just enjoying the hotel, and he doesn't want to be a nutritarian. But you know what happens? After he sits around the table and speaks to all these people and see how great they're doing, and he hears some of the lectures, he changed his mind. He started sitting in and learning more and became excited about it. He didn't know he'd be excited about it. He thought at the first he'd be negative until he heard more about it, and then it actually convinced him. And so I'm saying so many people, when they learn more, are more willing than you think. But that wife didn't force him and didn't push him into it and didn't pressure him. It was kind of like an art to have him do it, learn to do it with a little bit of love and not too much pressure. So I don't have all the answers, but I certainly have some experience in the matter. Good question, though.
And following to that, Dr. Fuhrman, in
What's that?
2005, I attended a seminar where I learned about how to eat health and have more energy. And then when I came back, I tried to teach my wife and my children. It was hard for them to buy the idea. And then I went with them to the same seminar 4 months later. And then they bought the idea.
And they liked it.
Yeah, there are many ways for us to do that. Huh? It was expensive, but it was worth.
You have to be able to do it with love. I was going to bring up this example. It's kind of a good example, even though it's not that applicable. It's that my son, he's like 5 years old, and he goes into a corner whimpering and crying with something I said to him or something I told him to do. And I went over to him and I said to him, "Oh, I'm sorry you're upset." And then I said to him, "Can I ask you a question though? What would you do in the same situation if you were me? If you were the father and I was the son, and you loved your son as much as I love you, what would you hope he would do?" And he was like 5 years old, but he got that concept. He got the concept that it was just because I love him so much. That was all I was telling, and he didn't get it. And then he said, so he's 5 years old, and he looked up at me and he goes, "I get it." Oh, great. And he stops crying immediately, got up and started went away with the play. Whatever he was doing. So it's just, you have to show the person that you care about them. That's the main thing for a person to want to hear what you have to say. And also, your own health and joy and emotional health is depending on your care for and your ability to be useful to other people. That's the best way you can build your own emotional health. So by trying to help other people in a way that's kind and having feeling for them is the best way you can help yourself at the same time. My findings are that the people that have lost 100 pounds, lost 150 pounds, lost 200 pounds, and kept it off for 5, 10, the rest of their life, kept it off forever, they always seem to have developed some superpowers. They've always developed some ability, excitement about their transformation has enabled them to have a beneficial effect on other people. They feel about the power they've gotten, to have some power, to have goodwill for others. It's just amazing how the most successful people have felt so proud of what they've done that they want to share it in some way to help others. And I see that as a beautiful thing.
Great. This is a good question. What advice would you give to someone who has intense cravings when first starting a diet, a nutrient-dense diet?
Right, the person. So I didn't talk about that in this lecture, but I have another lecture that's geared just about food addiction. And with food addiction, the person the worse the diet is when the person starts eating healthy, the worse the person is going to feel the first week they do this, because they're going through withdrawal from toxicity and addictive substances. So they could feel agitated, they could feel cravings, and they could feel this negativity bias that exacerbated when you take a person's alcohol away, you take their drug away, you take their rich food away, they start to become, and we have to counter that with mindfulness and some meditation and positivity bias. And the fact that feeling bad the first 3 or 4 days is not only to be expected, but it's good for you, because it means that you're getting rid of the noxious waste out of your body, and then people start really feeling good the second week. But keep in mind, fatigue is not hunger. Fatigue is withdrawal from your bad eating. And having fatigue is natural when you start eating this way, because you're dumping toxins from out of your body. But that goes away. So all these things that make the initial phase difficult, the agitation, the irritability, the negativity bias, the fatigue, the feeling of the headaches, all those things go away relatively quickly. But you got to get over that hump and just do this and stay with it and not medicate away those symptoms with drugs. You shouldn't be taking Tylenol and Motrin and aspirin and taking drugs for you. In other words, detox and don't take, and try to you get yourself better without the drugs. To get rid of the headaches, there's other ways we can get rid of the headaches, cold compresses, And mostly, in other words, doctors can give poisons to help people feel better. Like they can give you Esket, Vanquish, Excedrin, Furanol, Furoset, Midrin, all these drugs whose active ingredients are barbiturates, narcotics, and caffeine to make you feel better from your headaches. But that doesn't make your headache go away. It pushes the poisons back into your brain. So now you're going to feel worse the next day. You're going to turn an occasional headache into a chronic headache syndrome. If you're starting to detox and the detox could exacerbate a headache, you don't want to start taking poisons because it's going to stop the detox, because we want the detox to go away, because then the cravings are going to go away. So you're going to have to get through the feeling bad for a few days without trying to medicate the pain away.
Yeah, in a way you respond that, but I will read two questions together. No? How can I heal from terrible brain fog, and about migraines?
That is also, it's very much related to what I talked about. When I did that this morning on this interview, when they asked me what these most memorable cases were, I said this one girl, she missed ninth grade, 10th, she missed 8th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade. For 3 years, she couldn't go to school because her headaches were so bad. She not only went to doctors and neurologists, but she also was hospitalized in Johns Hopkins in Boston. No, I think it was Johns Hopkins in Boston, to try experimental intravenous treatment to stop her headaches. And she finally comes to me after failing all these different interventions for years. And obviously, in a few months, she gets well from her headaches. And her headaches are gone, and she comes on the stage with me in some presentations with these people, these young people who recover from these diseases. But she then became president of her high school class and went on the track team and went to college and had a successful college career. And she had a whole full and normal life after being unable to function as a teenager with all these headaches. And I have so many scores of people who've recovered from chronic headaches because the medications just make you sicker and sicker and sicker, because you're more dependent on drugs, and the worse you get, the more powerful medications you need. And it just is an unending, it's like it just builds up and never goes away. It keeps getting worse. Just like if you go to a doctor for diabetes, your sugar is elevated, and the beta cells in the pancreas are working really hard to produce extra insulin to bring the sugar down, but they can't produce enough anymore. They're pooping out because they can't produce all the insulin needed to push the sugar down. So then they go to a doctor and gives you drugs that make the beta cells push harder to make more insulin, and that makes sugars go down, but then you accelerates the rate at which diabetes develops. And then the link between the Accord study showed that more medical care for diabetics with better control of the blood sugar with drugs made them die younger, made them have morbidity and more mortality. And so medical care is not the answer to these dietary issues. It's changing your life and changing your diet and your lifestyle. So lifestyle medicine is where the answer is at. And the American College of Lifestyle Medicine has a board certification exam when it's now a new specialty in medicine. And even Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, who recovered from his diabetes through a nutritarian diet, has now incorporated a lifestyle medicine office in all the major hospitals in New York City. And there are lifestyle medicine physicians around the country that are advocating the type of work that we're talking about here. It's not functional medicine, it's lifestyle medicine. Too often the functional medicine is just trying to use some remedies and testing but lifestyle medicine gets right to the core. And there are thousands of certified physicians in lifestyle medicine today. So this has been a growing field.
Great, great. Two more. What advice do you have for a woman going through premenopause or menopause?
What advice? Well, look, the earlier in life you start doing this, the better you're going to feel when you go through menopause. If you go through menopause and you're having hot flashes or feeling poorly, and you follow this program and include the flax seeds and all the other things we're talking about, yes, you'll feel better, but it's not going to feel better right away. It's going to take many months for your body to acclimate to the lower levels of estrogen. If you acclimated to the lower levels of estrogen when you were younger, before you went through menopause, there wouldn't be such a change. So you'll feel better through menopause if you start this before menopause. If you start it after menopause, yes, you're going to feel better, and those hot flashes and those negative symptoms are going to go away, but it's going to take longer time now because your body is still, there's a bigger change to where how much estrogen production you had to where it dropped to. You were too high before, now you feel more estrogen deprived because when you had excess estrogen, then you had decreased number of estrogen receptors that had to atrophy themselves in response to the high levels of estrogen, which now you go to menopause and your receptors are so low that you feel more poorly. So you can get well. But the trick is you should not be using bioidentical hormones or estrogens to try to lessen your symptoms of menopause unless absolutely necessary and in the lowest dose possible. Absolutely necessary means you don't take enough to take away all your symptoms. You use enough to use your symptoms to make it tolerable so you can sleep and you can still continue and plan on cutting back. Because one of the biggest factors in medical care in the 1990s were that after 20 years of doctors trying to give every woman estrogen replacement, they finally realized from long-term studies that more women were dying of breast cancer and more heart attacks were occurring because of estrogen replacement therapy, even though doctors were trying to convince everybody it was going to be beneficial, going to build their bones and be better for their heart, and now we learned it wasn't true. And then you had an arm of the alternative medicine community that's avariciously trying to make more money, tries to advocate to women that they're going to give us now bioidentical hormones, which aren't going to have the negative effects of the synthetic ones from the drug companies, as if our own levels of estrogen aren't bioidentical. Did you follow that? Your own level of estrogen correlates with the risk of breast cancer, whether your body makes it itself. So the level of estrogen, bioidentical or not, is still a risk factor for breast cancer. So we want to minimize that and get you off of it if possible. And if you do this right, you wouldn't even need it. If you ate healthy enough and you did it early enough in life, you wouldn't need those things. Is that, I hope, what people were asking?
Okay, our last question, doctor.
Last question.
What lifestyle changes might help while dealing with thyroid issues?
Dealing with thyroid issues?
Yes.
Well, frankly, the major eating this way protects against thyroid disease, thyroid tumor, thyroid cancer. But once you develop hypothyroidism, low thyroid function, it usually does not take it away. Eating this way does not take that away because there's damage, permanent damage to the thyroid gland. You have to catch it very early in life when you first start to develop the lower thyroid function, because it's an immune attack on the thyroid gland, usually due to some susceptibility of the thyroid to plastics and chemicals in the environment that then affect the thyroid gland. And so it's usually something we do not see a complete recovery from. That's like one disease, but it's not a serious disease because people can just take a low dose of thyroid hormone that's adjusted to their blood work to keep the TSH between 2 and 4. We don't want to use excess amount of thyroid hormone you don't need excessively because that could be not good for that could age you and not be good for your heart. You just want to use the minimum necessary to keep the TSH between 2 and 4, but you're most likely going to still need thyroid hormone. But if you just say, for example, if you were a 300-pound person and you got to be a 150-pound person, your thyroid disease wouldn't go away, but you need half the dose of thyroid hormone because you're treating a smaller body mass. So as people lose weight, they need less thyroid hormone. But generally speaking, that does not go away, the low thyroid function. Is that what your question was, if it would go away? But it won't shorten your lifespan if you take the right dose of thyroid medication. It won't harm you. It'll only harm you if you take an excessive amount. So if you need some, don't worry about it. But I have to add to that since plastics are destructive to the thyroid, and we dump 1,000 tons of plastics into the ocean every hour, that the fish caught off coastal waterways are full of microplastic. And also, when you eat sardines, small fish, the plastic is in their digestive tract. And the small fish, you eat the fish with the digestive tract. And they're putting plastic in your body, which is not good for your health. The last thing I should say is that because of the agricultural runoff and the algae overgrowth in lakes and coastal waterways, we have more growth of cyanobacteria in the water, which leads to more BMAA, which is a toxin linked to ALS, and Parkinson's dementia syndrome. And that we're seeing a high incidence of cases around inner lakes and around coastal areas like Cape Cod where people are eating bivalves and shellfish. Because bivalves and shellfish, by the way, bivalves are clams, oysters, mussels, and scallops. It means they live on the bottom. And because the algae and cyanobacteria sink to the bottom, and these bottom feeders get 50 times the amount of BMAA compared to free-living fish. And so the shellfish, like the crab and lobster and the bivalves, have more concentration of these toxins. And compared to, let's say, if you ate a fish caught off the coast of Hawaii or something, you know what I mean? So it's the dumping of plastics and eating commercial raised fish, and all the commercial raised fish and the farm raised fish is been pens right off the coast of Europe and right off the coast of the United States, where you have more of the pollution and these problems. So you have to be careful with some of those foods.
Thank you, Dr. Fuhrman, for the outstanding lecture here and great answers. Thank you so much. And I would like to invite my family here. Yeah, Aubergine exists because of my family. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your wonderful support to us. And you keep improving.